I'd like to open this video by playing a clip for you guys, and do burn this one into your minds, as certain contradictions will become very apparent. So let's check this out.
So our promise to the community is that we won't have random loot boxes or pay-to-win scenarios.
So I wonder if they lived up to that promise, huh? Spoilers, they didn't. It's common knowledge at this point that Marvel's Avengers has been a troubled game since the beginning. Looking at the Metascore, it's still low scores across the board, just a buggy, incomplete, broken launch, as is expected of AAA live services these days, as commonly tends to happen, unfortunately. The player base, I mean, look at how much it's plummeted over the past few months, down to a couple hundred players every day, and it peaked a little bit when Black Panther released, but you can see how quickly the numbers diminished. Avengers did see a boost recently because it released on Xbox Game Pass and made it to the top 10 and whatnot, but how long that lasts obviously is a whole other story. I get the sense that once players play this game and realize it's actually not that fun, those numbers will probably go down, kind of like how it did on Steam. And a big issue with Marvel's Avengers and its live service nature is the microtransactions and how ludicrously expensive they are, despite this being a full price game. You can see the prices right here, at least at launch. I don't know if they've changed since, but I mean, just way overpriced for what you get and the quality of the cosmetics themselves. And at one point during this event called the Red Room event, people were pissed at the lackluster rewards. These were the skins that you got. They were just recolors of existing skins, and they weren't even rewards for the event, but rather relegated to the marketplace. Plenty of people complained about this one. And what rewards you did get for completing the event were lame frickin' nameplates, which are among the least desired rewards in the game. And it didn't help matters that the event was bugged and people just couldn't play it properly. And for those who did manage to complete the event, even some of those folks didn't end up getting rewards because of a bug. And beyond cosmetic rewards, loot has been an issue with this game that has not been addressed, which is why people have been requesting some kind of loot 2.0 patch overhaul that the developers have not been too keen on prioritizing. We have seen issues like IP addresses leaking through the game, and for the purposes of this video, one occurrence to keep in mind is when Marvel's Avengers reworked experience and tried to nerf the rate at which you earn rewards because they said people rewarded too fast, and that was confusing and overwhelming to newer players. Basically, everyone knew this was a bullshit excuse. That whole fiasco looks that much worse with the latest update that added something new to the microtransaction store, something that they promised they wouldn't add. Gameplay affecting microtransactions, specifically XP boosters, and clicking on this will reveal the full screen. And you can see right here on top you got the cosmetics, and below you've got consumables that are essentially straight up XP boosters to speed up your leveling. And this wasn't something that was promised just once at E3 2019, though that alone should have been enough. It was promised by the head of Crystal Dynamics, Scott Amos, as pointed out here by this Reddit user, who took a direct quote from back in June of 2019 and presented it. In terms of how we monetize, we'll have cosmetics. No gameplay paywalls, said Scott Amos, and there is a link to the article with a direct quote alongside other sources that basically iterated that this was never going to be an occurrence, though of course video game companies and publishers being what they are and how greedy they can get, it comes as no surprise that a AAA live service broke a promise about their intentions to be consumer-friendly. And it's not as if Marvel's Avengers was being consumer-friendly in the first place, it's just that much more anti-consumer now. And there are plenty of other Reddit posts expressing their grievances at the lies and the promises broken. Here's one individual who said, and yet here we are officially selling consumables, experience boosters, gear resources. A lot of people with games are usually quick to call the developer a liar, not me, because I understand an inability to offer something timely isn't necessarily a lie. It just means what you wanted to offer wasn't ready yet. But this, as a great supporter of this game, this is unjustifiable. This game has now pissed off even the most loyal of fans, what few remain. You asked during testing if consumables should be sold. I, and I assume countless others, said no, and reminded you of your promise and that the backlash would be terrible. You promised you wouldn't do this. You lied to all of us. We have asked for cosmetic skins. You gave us abominations. We asked for new game-changing characters. You gave us recyclable echoes. We asked for worthwhile gear, and you gave us reasons not to farm. Why? It isn't just the fact that they're adding that extra layer of gameplay affecting microtransactions, it's the state of the game itself. It's just not in a place where Marvel's Avengers can afford to piss off the community with such an addition. And so this is just the cherry on top to a really, really shitty cake, to a turd disguised as a cake. And all this comes following a troubled week where a number of other issues cropped up. So this Reddit user points out how the paid boosters were preceded by the Tachyon Surge fix and the bug during an Xbox live stream that caused the stream to end. I actually didn't know about this. That's yikes. But the Tachyon Surge fix, what they're referring to is essentially a nerf to a perk within the game that was used for a lot of endgame builds. As pointed out here by Forbes, Marvel's Avengers destroyed its best perk, breaking endgame builds, and barely mentioned it. Scrolling down, you'll find details. Endgame builds in Marvel's Avengers have mostly centered on one perk, Tachyon Surge, which has previously boosted all damage by 50% when activated. Tachyon Surge has now not just been nerfed, but more or less destroyed. I don't think it even made it into the official patch notes post, only a brief mention on Discord somewhere. This is not just some trivial change. This is one that affects tons and tons of players during endgame, and they failed to communicate this change. Scrolling further down the article, Crystal Dynamics left the perk in its current state since its introduction nearly a year ago. So this wasn't an issue that they detected and fixed immediately. They left it there for people to exploit, to use, to make builds around. And so tons of players after all this time will have a build centered around this key perk that has now not just been nerfed but utterly annihilated. Players have spent the last 10 months or so farming for that perk specifically on their gear to make endgame builds. Builds that are now functionally useless, and there's no way to swap perks or anything like that in Avengers. So this literally screws over players who now have to rebuild their characters. Maybe a small scale nerf would have been acceptable, but this renders the perk, which has been key to so many builds, utterly useless. That's pissed a lot of people off, and that's what preceded the current update that added the gameplay affecting microtransactions, the boosters and whatnot, that's now got the community pretty infuriated. There's been an utter lack of communication, and now we're delving into just outright lies and egregious breaking of very clear-cut promises. And so you've got loyal players posting stuff like, I no longer support this game. For the first time since this game launched, I no longer want to support it. And this is among the loyal players who's had a good time with this game and bought cosmetics because they wanted to support the developers and whatnot. But this is where they draw the line. This game doesn't have the luxury to do this when there's so much to be fixed. So much. And that's another thing. What I've covered in terms of issues with Marvel's Avengers is probably scratching the surface. No doubt if you ask a Marvel's Avengers player who's been with the game for a long time, they'll tell you even more issues that I have yet to discuss. And so for Square Enix and Crystal Dynamics to come out with an update like this during these tumultuous times, and I mean, let's face it, it's been tumultuous times for this game since launch, for them to do this, it is a punch to the balls after a slap to the face. Here's another Reddit user who expressed their umbrage against the game in its latest update, and the sequence of events that paint an egregious picture when it comes to Square Enix and Crystal Dynamics' intentions on how and why the XP boosters will implemented. The post reads, why selling XP boosters feels greasy to me. 1, they nerfed XP because players are getting overwhelmed, which we all know is BS. 2, start offering double XP months and quadruple XP weekends when you told your players that they were getting overwhelmed, which straight up proves that what they said previously about overwhelming players is utter BS. And finally, they did this after the launch of Game Pass, which launched alongside a 4 times XP weekend. And then after all that was over, after the XP buff is over with, they start offering the XP buffs via the marketplace. They start monetizing it after all that's died down. All to take advantage of new players following the surge of the player base with the Game Pass release. So this post back here about the XP rework and pacing issues and how it's confusing and overwhelming to newer players, we now know, of course, the real reason. The reason everyone knew back then why they did this. The potential and possibility of monetizing XP boosters, so players have to buy the solution to an issue that the developers and the publisher intentionally introduced to this game. That's microtransactions in a nutshell. You're not getting more, you're just paying for things that were stripped on purpose. And there are complaints across a number of outlets. Reset Era, the forum, also has people complaining about how after promising that this wouldn't happen, this has happened. And this post notes another promise that has gone unfulfilled. For those who do not know, they removed the in-game earnable cosmetics with a promise that they will be reintroduced in the future with a revamp. That was like 6 months ago at this point, and no news what that revamp is. And at this point, enough promises have been broken that this user now expects that loot boxes might come along and be a part of this cosmetic rework, and they'll start monetizing cosmetics that way. Who knows anymore? They promised back in E3 2019 no loot boxes. They also promised cosmetics only microtransactions. They didn't fulfill that promise, so at this point, it's impossible to believe anything that marketing has ever said. So yeah, loot boxes may very well come despite past promises. If the goal is to kill off what little loyalty is left from what little is left from the community, then congratulations, Square Enix and Crystal Dynamics. You're doing a great job at that with how you're handling this game post-launch during a time period when this game needs to be more consumer-friendly than ever and needs to find ways to attract players if it doesn't wish to die off in an unceremonious manner. And I'll be honest with you, this game seems to be well on its way to become the next Anthem. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is one man's take. Let me know in the comments below what your thoughts and opinions are on the current state of Marvel's Avengers and the introduction of gameplay affecting microtransactions such as XP boosters. Share your thoughts below, and to be further updated on all things gaming news, reviews, and discussions, stay tuned right here on Young Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Young out.